Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome. So tonight, our colleague, Dr. Lili Puppo, will be delivering the lecture. Lili is a social anthropologist who thinks and writes on religion, anthropology, theology, existential risks, human nature, relationality, and sacred sites. She holds a PhD in cultural studies from European University Virginia, Frankfurt, and an MA in political science from Berlin University, which is quite interdisciplinary, which I was happy to learn. She has held numerous postdoctoral positions and senior research fellowship positions. For instance, she's currently on leave from another postdoctoral researcher position in Berlin to be here in CAS-E with you all. She has been an assistant professor in the School of Sociology at Higher School of Economics in Moscow and was a research fellow at the Institute for Security and Development Policy, to name just a few. She has several publications, including being a co-editor of a volume called Peripheral Methodologies, Unlearning, Not Knowing, and Ethnographic Limits, which was published with Routledge. And her work in recent years, I noticed, has shifted to focus on contemporary Islam, Sufism in Russia, which she has published several articles on. So her talk today is entitled Sufi Practices and Knowledge Through Surrender, Developing a New Knowledge Approach in and for Uncertain Times. She draws from her fieldwork in Belgium to explore how Muslims draw inspiration from Islamic knowledge tradition to respond to challenges we are all facing, such as climate catastrophe, the fright of AI, and pandemics. She frames her work, her interlocutors' responses through the concept of quote unquote knowledge through surrender, presumably maybe building upon the work of the famous late anthropologist Salah Mahmood, who developed this conceptual framework in her book, Politics of Piety. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lili Puppo.
Thank you, Shobana, for this nice introduction. And so I will start my talk. And as Shobana said, my talk today is inspired by my recent work, and particularly the special issue I have co-edited with Fabio Vicini called Divine Presence, Muslim Ontologies, Anthropology Transcendence, published in RAU, Journal of Ethnographic Theory in 2024. And my own article in the issue is called What Does the Heart Want? Being Seen, Heart Ethnography and Knowledge Through Surrender in a Bashkir Sufi circle in Russia. And also I will draw today from a second article in the journal Globalizations Between Remembrance and Forgetfulness, Heart Perception, Oneness, and the Human Landscape Relationship in a Bashkir Sufi circle. So my fieldwork in Bashkortostan, you see it on the map here, in Russia's Urals. I did fieldwork with the Bashkir Sufi circle, Naqshbandi Sufis. And as we already mentioned in previous presentation in the lecture series, Sufism is often described as the mystical dimension of Islam. So during my fieldwork, I participated in pilgrimages at the graves of saints. They are called Auliya. I visited battle sites, historical sites. I participated in the Zikr ceremony. Zikr is the remembrance of God. And I had multiple conversations with the disciples who are called murids. And now my current fieldwork takes place in Belgium. The last few months before coming to CAS-E, I was in Belgium, Brussels. And there I attended the Zikr ceremonies of two Sufi circles, the Naqshbandi Haqqaniya Tariqa. Tariqa is the Sufi Brotherhood, and the Zikr meeting of Valeurs et Spiritualité Musulmane de Belgique. It's an organization that is connected with the Boudchitchia Tariqa, which is mainly based in Morocco. And finally, I attended a fiqh circle of the Alawiya Tariqa. So my current fieldwork is part of the project Muslims, the Secular and Existential Risks at the University of Glasgow. And as Shobana mentioned, this project addresses Muslim responses to the panoply of existential risks facing humankind in the 21st century, Such risks include pandemics, climate change, nuclear conflict, and threats from potentially malevolent developments in artificial intelligence. So in my own research, I am interested in the dimension of knowledge. And I ask mainly these questions for the moment. How do Muslims in Belgium and France perceive and respond to potential threats for humanity? And how can we approach contemporary threats from the perspective of the Islamic knowledge tradition? So a brief overview of the structure of my presentation today. First, I will address the question, what is a human being? Second, I will ask, why is verticality important in my research? I will tell you more about this. Then I will discuss different levels of knowledge according to the Islamic and Sufi knowledge tradition. And finally, I want to ask, what are the implications of what I call this verticality of knowledge for the relationship of the human with the world? So first, I start with the question, being human. What is a human being? What is the relationship of the human to the world creation? And finally, what is human knowledge? So what is a human being is, I think, a central question in our world today, for me at least. And these two research fields have proposed different approaches to this question. Transhumanism is one, and posthumanism is another one. What do these fields tell us? So they start from this question of what is a human is connected to the Enlightenment man, in which reason takes a central place in defining what a human is. So in transhumanism, we see more a continuation of this image of human intelligence as being defined by reason. And also connected to this, the human superiority because of reason. While in posthumanism, we see a critique, however, of the Enlightenment conception of the human. So posthumanism criticizes the notion of human superiority, and this notion can also be found in the model of the modern scientist who sees the world from this upright vertical perspective and as a detached observer. So the modern scientist is separated from the world, observes it. And now the multi-species approach that is connected to posthumanism rejects the superiority of the human over nature coming from the Enlightenment. So it emphasizes the interconnectedness of the human and other living beings. It criticizes human exceptionalism, a human-centered world, hierarchies. So in the end, it sees the world and the human place in it in a horizontal way, and it rejects verticality. So furthermore, the notion of human superiority is also connected to the Anthropocene. For example, this Philippe Descola highlights the position of the human being as a viscera of creation in the Christian tradition, emphasizing how these notions assert this human superiority over nature. And according to Descola and others, it is precisely this positioning, placing humans at the center of everything, that has led to the Anthropocene and the ecological crisis we witness today. Against these backgrounds of these questions about what is a human being and what is the place of the human in the world, in creation, I move to my interest in verticality. So why exactly is verticality important for my Sufi interlocutors and in my research? And also, what is actually to answer this question, what I will do now is to look at what is the perspective of Sufi metaphysics on the human being and the human being's relationship with the world creation. So I start from the Sufi knowledge tradition, Islamic knowledge tradition to look at this question. So to illustrate why verticality has become an important theme in my research, I now turn to my fieldwork and my experience of being seen from above. So I will explain in the following what I mean by that, being seen from above. So this is me, being seen. During my fieldwork, as I described in my article for How, I experienced being seen by my Sufi interlocutors because the picture you see here was taken by Aisilu, a woman who is a disciple in Bashkortostan, as we were visiting the grave of Auliya saint. So I was also being seen by the Auliya. The picture was taken near a saint's grave. And finally, my interlocutors made me aware that I was seen by God. Because as the Moshit spiritual guide told us near the saint's grave where the picture was taken, he said, "We do not see God, but sees you. But God sees you. Meditate. God is always with you. It is you who are not with him." I continue and ask the question, how was I seen exactly during my fieldwork by my Sufi interlocutors? And I was actually placed and seen in a position of bowing and surrendering, as you can see in the picture. It means that the ethnographic encounter happened on their own terms of my interlocutors. Indeed, Aisilu, who took the picture of me, was initially guarded when we met and not keen to talk with me or anyone in general. However, after taking this picture of me, finally she opened up to me and we had a very long conversation. So she decided when she wanted to talk to me. And Aitilu is a clairvoyant. She has an important role in the Tarika. She interprets the dreams of the Murids and she communicates with the dead. So on the theme, I continue on the theme of bowing. And I want to show this quote of the anthropologist Jean-Paul Baldacchino, who has noted that this position of bowing is quite an unusual position for the researcher, the scientist. So he reflected on his field experience of kneeling at a holy site and remarked that kneeling as an embodied form of surrender and submission dramatically subverts the triumph of the naturalist modern secular subject. I come back to this painting of Caspar David Friedrich that I presented before, and that illustrates for me the modern scientist seeing the world from an upright, vertical perspective. And I contrast this picture with a painting illustrating the Salat, the Islamic prayer, where showing that in the position of bowing in the Salat, the human being also becomes horizontal. I continue with my fieldwork and what I learned from my conversation with the Murshid al-Murid. And actually, I came to this realization that bowing is connected to verticality. So without verticality, there cannot be bowing surrender. And connected to this, I will explain how by bowing, the human being ascends. To do this, I now consider what human knowledge is. So what is human knowledge, starting from the Sufi Islamic tradition? And so during a long conversation I had with Leila, a Murid, in her flat in Brussels, where we spent long hours until it became dark and we were losing the sense of time. She told me these words: there are different levels of knowledge. These levels of knowledge will let you come closer to the state of the human who is in connection with the divine. So she pointed to the idea that there are different levels of human knowledge. And now I would like to ask a question to the audience. If someone can tell me, what do you think is the knowledge of Iblis, Satan? I would be interested to hear what you think. Iblis is the devil, Satan in Islam. So what do you think is his knowledge? Like, what does he know and not know? If anyone can tell me. Yes, Jovan.
It's Halaj is his interpretation of Iblis in that he was the only one who really got and understood monotheism, because his punishment was that where all the other archangels bowed to Adam, he refused to bow. So his crime was ultimately true love, Halajian interpretation.
This is nice. I think I like this. It's an interesting interpretation. And you are right to say that Iblis refuses to bow to Adam, believing himself to be superior because he is made of fire, while Adam is made of clay. And actually, you see that Iblis is the one who is not bowing and doesn't look exactly like the devil in our paintings. But now we'll have another image and an answer to this question by Moomin Moritz in Brussels, who told me the devil is one of the greatest scholars. So one of us. So he told me that they say that the devil is one of the greatest scholars. He knows all the books, the Torah, the Zabur, the Bible, the Quran by heart, but he does not possess divine knowledge. But maybe he loves God, as you say, but according to Moomin, he doesn't possess divine knowledge. And so Moomin continued by explaining to me during our conversation that there are two main forms of knowledge. And he said the first one is the knowledge we acquire from books, etc. And the second one is the one that God bestows upon those he chooses. And this knowledge goes directly to the heart. So now I'm interested in this form of knowledge that goes directly to the heart. And again, I use the term from above, and I'm interested in the view from above. I will explain why. And I will ask who are the ones chosen by God, and what is this knowledge that goes directly to the heart? And so I will turn to a conversation I had again with the Moshid spiritual guide in Bashkortostan. And actually, I was asking him, the theme of our conversation was, who are the awliya, the Sufi saints? And so he told me that the earthly existence is defined by measurements, yet as one ascends, as you can see on this mountain, these measures and limits fade from view. So what does he mean by that? He told me the story of the disappearing fence. Here are kilometers by kilometers frames. A fence is constructed, an immense fence. A person can live inside the fence, actually us. However, if there is a mountain inside and the person climbs it, the fence will become smaller, revealing its limits. Seen from a helicopter, it will turn into a dot. And from an airplane, it is not visible anymore. So the fence disappears. Then he continues by saying, talking about the nafs. In Islam, it is the ego, the lower self, can be translated as such. And he said, as the energy of life, the nafs leads us to God, but only if we have it in our grip. Comparing the nafs to a horse, an airplane, or a skyrocket to explain how its energy can rise, the Moshid observes, if the nafs brought you to Allah, it vanishes. So what he describes is actually the taming of the nafs. So the spiritual process of taming the nafs in Sufism. So now we continue the conversation and he actually mentions next Ural Batir. Ural Batir is the hero of the Bashkir epic of the same name that is similar perhaps to Gilgamesh and to the Kalevala in Finland and Karelia. He says, he, Ural-Batir, gave up his life for eternity, understanding that there is no eternity in this life. Hereby, he continued to exist in eternity, his soul, Ruh. So Ruh can be translated in Islam as the higher self, perhaps the soul. And so if in the quest for absolute love, someone attains this ocean of love and becomes a zero, at the same time, he becomes immense, infinite. So now I just present the Ural-Batir, the story, the Bashkir epic Ural-Batir. Ural-Batir chooses in the story to pour the living water which gives eternity onto earth instead of drinking it and becoming eternal. So for the Bashkir Sufis, he is considered a prophet within Islam. And you can see a picture I took of his grave on the right. He made a really big grave because he was a giant. It is a place of pilgrimage for the Bashkir Sufis. So now I come to oneness, Tawhid in Islam, and want to ask, what does the conversation with the Murshid say to me, to us, in terms of human knowledge? Becoming a zero alludes to the spiritual state of fana in Sufism, and the scholar of Islam, Toshihiko Izutu, in his discussion of Watat al-Wujud, the oneness of being, unity of existence in Sufism, remarks that in our positioning as subjects, we see the phenomenal world as delimited, composed of innumerable things. But this perception dissolves in the experience of fana. And so the story, this spiritual experience, refers to the story of the disappearing fence that the Murshid told me. And so the heart perception, or the perception that one has on the spiritual path, experiences the states of attaining the ocean of love and becoming a zero, means that the human becomes aware simultaneously of the aliveness of all things in the cosmos and of the source of this aliveness, God. So now I want to turn to the question, who are the awliya? The question I asked the Murshid. And he answered by citing a famous hadith. When I love him, I am his hearing with which he hears, his sight with which he sees, his hand with which he seizes, and his foot with which he walks. This is Allah saying this. And he's referring to the ones chosen by God, the servants of God. So the awliya are the ones chosen by God. And this is, their knowledge is the knowledge that goes directly to the heart, or the divine knowledge that Mumin referred to when he evoked the two main forms of knowledge. So it means that the sense perceives the world from the perspective of God, of eternity. So now, in the previous slides, I have presented knowledge in this vertical form, the ascending the mountain. And now I want to ask, what are the implications of this conception of knowledge for the relationship of the human with the world creation? So I start with two quotes by the Murids, disciples in Brussels. First, Leila told me everything is but a mirror that also reflects us. Then Mumit told me the outer world is a reflection of our inner world. And Leila continued by saying this: from the moment we distanced ourselves from the sacred, it gave rise to various disturbances as we no longer respect anything. We no longer regard others, animals, plants, and non-human beings as sacred, as part of divine creation and signs of God. And she continued and says, if we see other beings not as signs of God, but as commodities, we adopt a materialist relationship to everything. We no longer associate contemplation, mystery, and sacredness with other beings. And she also remarks and showed me her balcony and how she's sweeping the balcony and said, if there are ants, I will carefully avoid disturbing them. Then she further said this to me. Ignorance is when someone treats an animal as an object devoid of sentience. There are different levels of ignorance. At the lowest level is the blind man. So she came back to this theme of the different levels of knowledge, this time referring to different levels of ignorance. And finally, she said these words in our conversation. In Islam, there is a relationship with the world in which everything that appears is a sign, a manifestation of the divine. Everything points to something superior, and everything is but a mirror reflecting the human. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Again, on the theme of everything is but a mirror, where she also told me these words that human beings are connected to nature. By disconnecting from nature, we disconnect from ourselves. And the fact that the earth is full of plastic and pollution, everything is but a mirror of humanity. So it means that we ourselves are polluted. And if we weren't, we wouldn't be doing this, polluting. So now I come to some conclusions of my talk. And actually, what happened to me in my fieldwork is that I approach what I have called today the herd knowledge or herd perception by becoming aware that I am seen, as I said before. And it means that I see myself through the eyes of my interlocutors in a position of submission, surrender. I see myself from the perspective of eternity, from this invisible realm, and from the perspective of the spiritual sides of the dead Aulia, which transcends time-space boundaries. So in fact, my question was if I have difficulties or I can only catch glimpses of the invisible, how do I become aware of it? And actually, I become aware of being seen from this perspective. And this is how I approach the invisible in my research. And coming back to my initial question, why is verticality important for me? So why I want to keep this dimension in my research and the way I approach the human. So I come back to this argument of Phyllis Descola, where he highlighted the position of the human being as the viscera of creation in the Christian tradition, and this problem for him of the human superiority over nature. So actually, as I said before, without verticality, there cannot be borrowing surrender. By borrowing, the human being ascends in knowledge, and this position of borrowing shows for me another dimension of being human that sheds light on the specific position of the human in creation. The servants of God, the Aulia, represent this other dimension of being human in contrast with the viscera of creation, the vicegerent of God, the deputy of God, the Khalifa in Islam. And what is important to note is that without being a servant of God, the human cannot be a Khalifa. So one and the other, the two poles are connected. So it means that actually in my conversations with my interlocutors, many times, at least in two, the theme of the figure of Pharaoh appeared. Pharaoh representing in the Quran, Pharaoh and Moise. So Pharaoh being the ego that is not growing. So one interlocutor said today's world is a world, he mentioned the words of a Sufi saint who came to France at the beginning of the last century, so the industrial world, and say this is a world of pharaohs without Musa Moise in it. Now, I also want to mention that in my research, I'm interested For the moment, I cannot say much about it, but I'm interested in the mirror as a mode of approaching reality. And Paulo Pinto mentioned in his research, he observed that the optics of knowledge of a divine reality in Sufism is not the transparency of the glass, as it would be in modern reason, but the mirror. So I want to think of how I can use this image in my approach to knowledge. For the moment, this is just indicating a direction that I want to take. And I just referred to the video. And to conclude, I also came across an image in the last days of the salad in the book of Sufi healing that I have here in French. And that shows actually, I think, the different positions of the human in the Islamic prayer that shows how you see the Arabic letters spell the name of Adam. And it shows actually that the human is connected to the universe in different ways. So one idea about the salad is that in the horizontal position, the human connects to the animal kingdom. In the submission to the mineral kingdom. So it shows these different positions of the human, not only the vertical one, because ultimately the human is defined as a vertical being in creation, just as the tree. But it shows that in the salad, the human is no longer just vertical, and you see this all the possibilities of dimensions of the human in it. And so I also show this image in the same book of the cosmos creation, but let's say it's only one one way of looking. I mean, I would say Sufi metaphysics is very large and complex, so this would be one way of looking at the cosmos, the world, but there are other ways. So, but I think it illustrates how the human, again, is not simply superior over nature, but is in a position between, in relationship to God and the heavens. And so it actually shows that the human position is actually complex and not only one of superiority, I think. So last slide, just of Mumin, who said this importance. I think an important aspect of my research is also the relationship of the microcosm and the macrocosm. So the outer world is a reflection of our inner world, he said, and how we interact with others, with our ecosystem, and with the world comes from within. And so if a person is not at peace with herself, the energy she transmits will prevent her from being at peace with others, with her loved ones. And if there is no peace with family and friends, this will also create conflicts in society, in the community, and in the country. So these are, again, words where we see that the inner dimension of the human is important in the way my interlocutors approach the question of contemporary crisis and threats for humanity. So they look always at this inner dimension. So I stop here and thank you for your attention.